Hello, my imaginary friends. Today, as usual, Dutch and Maptuk are with you. Guy, right as far as you can hear us well, because the pests are becoming active again, and can harm our wonderful stream in terms of equipment. So, according to tradition, let me read out the donations that came between streams. So, John Salas, 230 rubles, to support the broadcast about the gods of chaos. Thank you. Diversus, 230 rubles, with the coverage of the Goy Guy's Commission to support the ether. The topic is really interesting. Guy Goy on Meng, 230 rubles, with the cover of the commission Gui Guy Guy Goy. Mikhail, 230 rubles with commission coverage. Greetings, gentlemen, magic. Can you tell me why there is such a phenomenon as a totem beast? It is formed at the level of egregores or archetypes, and for what purpose? Well, in general, the animal code is one of the most ancient, if not the most ancient. And for such antiquity, it seems to me that in general, the concept of egregores or archetypes is not very applicable, although archetypes are possible. And when they talk about a totem beast, they should be taken literally. That is, people came into contact with a very specific animal and considered it not exactly a patron, but as an ally. We are friends with Aptuk. Well, shamans, respectively, could turn into this beast. Well, or in some animals, because, well, it happens that the tribe has some kind of totem. Most likely, this means that it's very, very close. How much does this have to do with archetypes? Well, we have now, so to speak, our setup. Our ones on Ufresca have changed quite a bit, and now it's impossible to say. That is, whether it applies, whether it can be attributed to archetypes. Although in ancient times, I think, quite just. After all, even astrology, it's all tied up with totem animals of one kind or another. Boris the Drone, 155 rubles 93 kopecks. Hello, gentlemen magicians. You once said that the truth is on the side of chaos. Was there a time when truth was on the side of order? Are you ready to join the forces of order, and under what events? To put it very roughly, and there was never any truth on the side of the order, and in principle there could not be. And I think that we will simply develop this topic in more detail much later, because it is too complicated, and now there is no point in touching on it at all. Protopriest Thulhuslav, 1,000 rubles with commission coverage. Gentlemen magicians, we pray with all our parish for your health, death by an insectoid, and an antispiral. For truly. John Johnson, 500 rubles to support the movement. Alexander, 570 rubles, without a message. House Fog, 578 rubles. Guy about the MV's 500 rubles with commission coverage, also without a message. Jeff Cookham, 927 rubles. Guy mind control. Gentlemen Magin, to what extent fate and luck play a role in the fact that one person returns alive from the war, and the other finds his death on board the plane? How does the universe cast for the role of the victim? Well, what does it mean how much? In other words, in order for us to answer how much fate and luck plays a role in this, we need to start some kind of evaluation scale, determine some zero value on it, and grade it, because it's somehow difficult to say without it. Personally, I find it difficult to give any quantitative assessment. I just want to add here that review the stream about luck, and here I will give such a note. So luck is really such a complicated topic, plus the matrix will resist it. Well, with this explanation, and accordingly, here's what if you don't understand, say, and you have a question left after watching the stream about luck. In my opinion, we also had open ones about luck. In my opinion, we then closed them all after some unpleasant events. I think there's something left there. There could have been something, but I'll sort of repeat my thought and expand it a little. Luck and fate play a serious role. But in order to evaluate it, you need some kind of evaluation scale with its own zero, with its own with its division price. And this is quite a serious scientific work. And how does the universe cast for the role of the victim? No way, because the universe does not hold auditions. It's not a person. Mind control, for 230 rubles. Gentlemen magicians, what is sculpture from the point of view of magism witchcraft? To what extent does the theme of mannequins made of clay, stone, and so on affect the viewer's assemblage point? And why do people create their own duplicates? As we have already said, a sculpture, a painting, a song, a dance, all these things are a spell. That is, it is a certain record of the position of the assemblage point, which, in theory, should shift the assemblage point of the viewer, the listener, the dancer, to the position that is recorded in this spell. That is, initially it is a spell. And why do people create their own duplicates? If you mean a double in the concept of the great leader-teacher Carlos Castaneda, then people do not create them. They have them, like you have, for example, hands there and legs or eyes. It's just an integral part of the body. And if you mean sculptures, then they create them for different purposes, for the same purposes for which they create other spells, each for its own. Let's remember the monuments to Lenin, and not only to Lenin, but to various Pushkin and everyone there. In other words, they all seem to support a certain position of the assembly point, the connection of times, so to speak. And not only that. Here, like any art in general, in fact, in other words, it is quite closely connected with magism, witchcraft. But since it has been divided, let's say, in the last few hundred years, then how would people like this connection? It is not always obvious to them. Here, even for those who may be creating these sculptures. I am now probably going to read out the donates that we have already read out on the previous stream, but I think it's better I repeat some donates several times than skip some of them. So, John Johnson, 400 rubles, I will support with intent. Diverses, 230 rubles, with commission coverage, without messages. Solar, 230 rubles, to support the ether. Guigea, Gaigo. Alexander Ink Sauce, 300 rubles with commission coverage. Dear magicians, I am sincerely grateful to you for your activity. Goigea, Goigeo. John Salvas, 230 rubles of Goigai, to support the ether Gaigo. Sergei Semart, 230 rubles without messages, and Dino 5,145 rubles 56 kopecks, with commission coverage by a Goigai message. Gaigoi. And this donut, I have already read out for sure on the previous broadcast. So, while I was reading out the donations, a few more pieces came. Rodion Cherapovich, 333 rubles, with a commission covering for the support of the Goigega movement. Ilya D., 230 rubles. Mr. Magi, what is your opinion about Chagin and the fat vile psychologist, who have recently been frequenting the Institute B? They are always pests if you are aware of these characters. Well, I've seen them briefly, and definitely can't say that they are some kind of pests. That is, a psychologist, even though he seems fat and disgusting to you, in my opinion, just talks about psychology, what it is now in general. Have you come across this? I'm not aware at all. I'm not aware. No, I didn't stumble. We cannot make our expert assessment, because we are not familiar enough with the discourse. And Goigea, 155 rubles 93 kopecks. Mr. Dutch, how did you meet Mr. Moptuk? On the internet, as it will not seem strange. John Salas, 230 rubles, to support the broadcast about the gods of chaos. So that's it. We finished reading out the donations, and let's be friends Aptuk. Before we actually move on to the main topic about the gods of chaos and human culture, about Lovecraft and Warhammer, I'll make some digression. I'll add, so to speak, a remark. Imagine a colony of fruit flies that has been living in a wall clock for many generations. That is, the absolute majority of flies live in these wall clocks, and some flies, if they fly out, are only pitiful ones. And so they live in the world of these slender gears that walk according to certain laws, study them as people study the surrounding reality. They write out certain formulas that can be used to calculate the rotation of certain gears, and thus get to know the world around them. And when these fruit flies want to describe something beyond what they have long been familiar with, namely a wall clock,
хотят описать что-то, выходящее за пределы того, что им давно знакомо, а именно настенных часов.
they invent, as a rule, the same wall clocks, but which operate according to some slightly different laws. That is, their gears, for example, are not round, but square. They rotate not clockwise, but counterclockwise, or one turn there, one turn here. And in their opinion, this is something beyond and truly chaotic. And when people try to convey a description of chaos and the gods of chaos, it always turns out to be a description of some crooked clocks in which people have been living for many, many generations. That is, they have square gears, then they spin in the wrong direction, then they don't spin at all. And this is the thermal death of the universe. We are friends with Aptuk. Well, I'll start with the fact that before moving on to the gods of chaos in human culture at all, it will be necessary to sort out what culture actually is. Also, at the same time, touch upon the topic of philosophy in its applied sense, and most importantly, mythology, because without understanding these things, the rest will be incomprehensible. And by the way, I just want to disappoint our listeners and viewers a little bit. This particular program is dedicated to the chaos gods in human culture, not how the Gaigai movement understands it. Before we sort it out, that is, when we say both chaos based on our own experience, it will be completely different. And it will be on the channel messenger of chaos most likely. Here. And here, as it were, it is a preparatory ether to get rid of meanness, delusion, and all sorts of heresy. I would like to at least, that is, if you are not sure, that we may not have enough time for this broadcast to disassemble everything to the end, even the gods of chaos in human culture. At least we'll try. Yes. First of all, it is necessary to sort out what human culture is in general and represents itself. I realized that I needed to touch on this topic when, after a glimpse on YouTube, I decided to listen to various, so to speak, YouTube philosophers for more than a couple of minutes. And I realized that they don't even understand such simple things, but for them philosophy is most likely a set of clever words with which you can show off. Well, about like why people like to read all sorts of shit on the internet, so that they can learn some new insults, swear words, and then successfully return them to shit someone. It's the same here. That is, people operate with smart words just for the sake of operating with smart words, and that's it. For them, philosophy is not applied, even to the point that these people do not quite understand what the cultural code is and what culture itself is, but can only retell books at best. Here, in my opinion, everything is very simple here. Culture can be said to be like basic firmware, and we have already talked about this. That is, that's about how the operating system there is Windows, or on a mobile phone it's Android or something. What other system is there? AOS? AOS? Yes. And accordingly, it depends on this software, what you understand in this world at all, how you can describe it, and most importantly, how you can interact with other people. In other words, this is what we talked about when we mentioned the protocol of communication, that is, the so-called politeness. That's what it's for. In order for people to be able to create complex social structures, and accordingly, complex social structures are needed in order to produce complex social activities and production activities. That is, if the culture is weak, primitive, then accordingly, you probably will not find any geniuses and scientists from this people or from this culture. That is, if, well, how to say, they can be there, but it is in the potential. That is,
То есть,
again,
опять же,
going back to your
возвращаясь к
comparison
твоему
with the
сравнению
operating
с
system,
операционной
there may be
системой,
very powerful
может быть
complex
очень
hardware, but if you
мощное,
put a weak
сложное
operating
железо,
system on
но
it,
если на
then
нее
most of the
поставить
features of
слабую
this powerful
операционную
complex
систему, то
hardware will simply be
большинство
unavailable.
возможностей этого мощного сложного железа будут попросту недоступны.
It's
Это
like at
как в
one
свое
time,
время,
when they
когда
worked on the DOS operating system,
работали
even the
на
most advanced
операционной системе
622
DOS,
there, in my
та
opinion,
же самая
was
там
more or less
продвинутая
away.
6.22, по-моему, более-менее путевая была.
But, under
Но
this
под
operating
этой
system,
операционной
if you
системой,
work
если
only with
работать
its
только ее
means,
средствами,
only
было доступно только
640
640
kilobytes of
килобайт
RAM were
оперативной
available,
памяти, при том,
despite the
что на
fact that
компьютерах
16
давно уже
megabytes
стояли
had been
там
there for a long
16
time.
мегабайт,
There were
там
even 32
даже
megabytes
32
somewhere,
мегабайта где-то стояло.
and in
И
order to
чтобы
get
получить
access to
доступ
this
к этой
RAM,
оперативной
we had to
памяти,
use a variety of patches
приходилось
that
применять
put the
разнообразные
processor into the
заплатки,
so-called
которые
protected mode.
переводили процессор в так называемый защищенный режим.
Well,
Ну
yes,
да, вот
but
если,
if we assume some
допустим,
person,
какой-то
his
человек, у него
vocabulary is
словарный
limited
запас
to only
ограничивается
100
всего лишь
words,
100
then
словами,
accordingly,
то,
it is
соответственно,
unlikely
вряд
that
ли
this
этот человек
person will be
будет
capable of some
способен к
complex
какой-то
engineering
сложной
activity.
инженерной
That is,
деятельности.
yes,
То есть, да,
there
вот
is a
запас
stock of
слов
words
нужен
needed for
несколько
several
десятков, а
tens,
лучше
and
даже и
even
сотен,
better,
да,
hundreds by thousands,
особенно
especially
для
for
деятелей
cultural
культуры.
figures. Here, and it is in
И
this
именно в этом
context
контексте и
that
надо
it should be
понимать.
understood, for example,
Например,
that
вот
for an
чем отличие
Indian,
там
for example, it is
для
relatively
индуса,
normal
например,
to
является
save there
относительно
or
нормальным
take a
там
shit
посрать
right
или
on the street
посрать
and lie
прямо на
down
улице
somewhere
и
to
рядом
rest
там
there.
лечь где-нибудь отдыхать.
Here,
Вот.
for
Для
us,
нас это,
it is,
ну, то есть это
well,
тоже
it is
является
also a
культурой. То есть для
culture.
нас такое
That is,
поведение
for us
странно.
this behavior is
Вот.
strange. Here, and
И
here
вот
are
здесь
the
вот
various
различные
differences.
отличия.
Each
Каждая
culture is
культура,
good there
она
for its
хороша
own
там
certain
для
things.
своих определенных каких-то дел.
She
У
has
нее
some
есть какие-то
vulnerabilities.
уязвимости.
But what
Но
am I
я
saying
для
all
чего
this
это всё
for?
говорю, что
That without
без
this RAM, a
вот
person
этой вот
simply will
оперативной
not
памяти
distinguish between
человек
some
просто не
kind of
будет
complex
различать
world, consisting of many
какой-то
complex
сложный
objects.
мир, состоящий из многих сложных предметов.
That
То есть
is,
у него
he
будет
will have a less developed
менее
mind, and a
развитый ум.
developed
А
mind, so to
развитый ум,
speak,
так сказать,
and
и
a
развитый
developed
тонально,
tone, it
он
is, let's say, necessary in the development
в
of our
развитии нашей
civilization.
цивилизации, скажем так, необходим.
Here,
Вот.
and this
И
is,
это
well, in
является,
principle,
ну,
quite a
в
positive
принципе,
thing.
довольно позитивной такой штукой.
That is,
Тут
here the mind not
ум
only harms
не
us,
только
but
нам
also
вредит,
helps
но
us in
и
many
во
ways.
многом помогает.
And
И,
accordingly,
соответственно,
the development
развитие
of
общества
society
можно
can be
мерить
measured by
по
culture.
культуре.
Here,
Вот.
accordingly,
Соответственно, здесь вот
here
философия
philosophy becomes an
становится
applied
прикладной
science
наукой,
because it adds
потому
some
что она
meanings, let's
добавляет
say,
какие-то
makes
смыслы,
the coordinate grid more
скажем так,
detailed, and it is
делает
possible to catch some more subtle,
координатную
small
сетку,
meanings, and completely
сетку
new ones,
более
which no one
подробной,
caught
и
or
в
saw
ней
before
можно
this,
уловить
let's say,
какие-то более
philosophical
тонкие
idea of the
мелкие
current.
смыслы, причем совершенно новые, которых до этой, скажем так, философской идеи или течения никто не улавливал и не видел.
And here's
И
how mathematics really is,
тут вот
how mathematics
как
often
математика,
surpasses
на
very
самом деле,
much,
как вот
but not
математика
even often,
часто
but
очень
by
перегоняет,
100,
ну, даже не часто,
150.
на 100, на 150,
This
а
sometimes
иногда
drives
на
its
200
practical
лет перегоняет
application
ее
for
практическое
200 years.
применение.
So it is
Так и
here.
здесь.
That
То
is,
есть вот
if a
если
person does not
у
have
человека
certain
нет в
meanings in
голове
his head,
определенных
then,
смыслов, то,
accordingly, he
соответственно,
cannot operate with it. For him, it
этим
simply
не
does
может
not
оперировать,
exist.
для него это просто не существует.
Again,
Опять же,
here we
тут
can
можно
return to the topic of
возвратиться
human
к теме
tone.
человеческого тона.
What is not in
Мне
the
в тонале
tonal
довольно
does not
существует
exist at
общее.
all. As soon
Как
as
только
meanings and
смыслы
words
и
appear,
слова
then
появляются,
immediately this
то тут
object
же
or concept
этот
is, let's
предмет
say,
или
in what we
понятие
consider the
находится,
real world
как
and
бы,
real
скажем так,
life.
в том, что мы считаем реальным миром и реальной жизнью.
Let's
Вот.
be friends.
дружим,
A
Апук,
puke,
я приведу
I will give the
простейший
simplest
пример.
example.
Те,
Those who are
кто
more or less
более-менее
familiar
знаком
with the
с историей
history of
античности, в
antiquity
курсе,
are
что
aware that
социальные
social
связи там
ties there were
были
developed
развиты
quite seriously,
достаточно
and these social
серьезно.
ties
И
made it
эти
possible to build
социальные
quite
связи
complex
позволяли
structures,
строить довольно
complex
сложные
buildings made of
сооружения.
stone. There is
Сложные
even
постройки
plumbing,
из камня,
floors,
там даже
underfloor heating,
водопровод,
as it were. Well, with
полы,
heating in
теплые
ancient
полы,
Rome,
как бы
it
вот
was
это
quite
с
in the order of
отоплением,
things,
в
even a
Древнем
hot
Риме
water
это вполне
pipe.
себе было в порядке вещей. Даже водопровод с горячей водой.
But at the
Но при
same
этом
time,
почему-то
for some
совершенно
reason,
не
neither
использовали
steam
ни
engines
паровые
nor the same
двигатели, ни те
electric
же
engines
электрические
were used at
двигатели.
all,
Хотя
although
на
at that
том
level of
уровне развития
development of
науки и
science and
техники
technology,
это было
it was
более
more than
чем
affordable,
доступно.
because it's
Потому
the
что
same.
тот же...
Oh wait,
подожди.
I'm here now, and that's it, Skudovitz was banned.
Скудовца забанили.
Because the
Потому что
same
тот же
electric motor
электрический
is
двигатель не
not something
представляет из себя
fundamentally
чего-то
complicated.
принципиально
It's
сложного.
just a
Это
piece of copper
просто
wire
кусок медной
wound on some
проволоки,
kind of base.
намотанный на какую-то основу. основу,
This
эта
base has the
основа
ability to
имеет
rotate.
возможность вращаться.
At the same
Поэтому
time,
само
the
явление
phenomenon of
электричества
electricity
было
itself was
известно.
known. They also knew how to make copper wire, but for some reason, electric motors were not made, as well as steam engines. Moreover, the very principle of steam movement was also known. And why? But because there was no such simple cultural meaning. That is, why and why this was not in the minds of people. They simply did not do it, and they did fine without it. Slavery. It is believed that once there are slaves, then why do we need engines? But this is exactly the same cultural code, the same culture. Why do we need steam engines when you can catch up with these fuckers, and they will do everything themselves? Yes, then, it is quite possible that the culture has degraded, and it is already as if it could not be done. Here again, you can return to these philosophers scant-minded, that is, the maximum they are capable of is writing some texts again. Well, and get paid for this money, to be just like these little pug that eats elephant shit. This is a quote from Pelevin, which we published. Perhaps, by the way, one of the best moments in the book, which is frankly a little weak, is the new Pelevin. Here, by the way, I may refer to the new book a couple more times, because there will be something to refer to there, although, of course, it is weak, it has much less meaning than in Pelevin's previous books. Here you can also compare human culture with artificial intelligence. In other words, let's say you can show different pictures to artificial intelligence, but in order for it to learn to recognize faces, you need to pour a certain, well, create a program for it so that it learns to recognize these faces. That's what we're talking about. That is, if there is no such thing in culture, then it simply does not exist, and no matter how a person perceives these meanings, that is, they are completely absent for him. What is not in the tonal, and this is precisely what is set first of all by culture. Here. Yes, down to the number of colors. It's like in English-speaking culture, there is no division between blue and blue. They have just blue, for example. Yeah, that's why there are only 6 colors of the rainbow on the flag of the faggots, not 7. By the way, let's digress a little, just talking about this rainbow flag. Very much, when all this game is about the rainbow, that the rainbow is the same, some kind of gay symbol, but the blue flag is 6-colored, respectively, and the rainbow is 7 colors. That's how they can be easily distinguished, let's say, by eye. And the geon is a flag, or a rainbow is meant. Here too, you see, without knowing it, or not noticing, that our legislators, or whatever they are called there, see, they also do not distinguish between superfluous colors apparently, and do not distinguish the meaning. There you go. It's like you know, this extra stone in the garden of the fact that they are all English spies. Or American. So well, I hope the theme of culture at its core is clear, because of course culture has, well, how to say. In fact, we have described the base, and understanding the base, you should understand everything else. Ask some additional questions if you don't understand something about culture, so I think it will even be possible to do the same. Let me just read out the question right away. Gentlemen magicians, how do you think spontaneity, chronicity? Hello again. I hope you can hear us perfectly on the air right now. At least, the program settings show it that way. We were interrupted on the answer. To the next question, and gentlemen magicians, how do you think spontaneity, chronicity, and randomness are concepts close to each other? It all comes down to the question of proximity. Now the conditional meaning of words is being replaced by an evaluative one. And what is spontaneity? This is exposure to certain elements, that is, in the literal ancient Greek sense. the elements of fire there, air, earth or water tonicity and so on, and still the ether strives to fall. Therefore, moreover, it falls at exactly the same moment, at the same time, when, as it were, the dukkha answers, and I begin to answer, and at that moment it falls, but it remains on the air, only on the same phrase about it. In short, I want to say this. This question is untimely. We will answer it at the end of the broadcast. Here, at the very end, when our broadcast will be over. And if the ether drops, no one will feel sorry for it anymore. And then these tudo and pseudo, and the expectations when we turn on. It's annoying. Maybe I'll move on to donates, because we were given donates while we were talking. We will answer the donations, and continue further on the topic. So, the evil Stalinist, the Goyim, the magicians, the square architecture of the modern world, for example, Khrushchev, and the evil Stalinist 500 rubles. Goygeya, gentlemen magicians, the square architecture of the modern world, for example Khrushchev, the square architecture of ancient Vilona, is this a kind of anti-house in the service of insectoids? Thank you. You're welcome. By the way, you have noticed this connection of the Stalinist architectural style with Babylon. Because if you look at it, Khrushchev, no, it is Stalin's, this classic Stalinist style of yellow-facing stone, especially at the Mayakovskaya station, that is clearly noticeable. And look at the drawings of various reconstructions of ancient Babylon. It's just so similar, just fucked up. But it's hard to say exactly how anti-house it is, because I'm not even sure what. You see in this one, in general, let's give a friend, let's answer the topic of chaos, when we talk about the topic of chaos, and now we are. Well, I'll say it like that. The fact is that this one here, in Babylon too, as in in almost all of these ancient cultures, our entire current world was born out of ancient chaos. In this case, in my opinion, Tiamat won there. And from this ancient serpent Tiamat, our current world was conquered. To what extent exactly this Babylonian chaos can be considered the chaos that is implied in our current culture now is a big question. In general, this is a slightly different topic. We'll get to her later. In other words, these are all the questions. Yes, a friend, a daughter. Here are the questions affecting chaos. If we have time, we will sort them out at the end of this stream. But for now, we need to come up at all. Here, let me go further. I'll be quick. No. Yes, I just want to remind you. I wanted to hear the questions about exactly what I was talking about. Culture. Yes, if you have. Ask questions about culture now, when we will try to answer them, before going any further. And about chaos, it's not necessary to get ahead of yourself. That is, we will definitely go through it again at the end, and answer everything. Here. So, of course, Simikovkin Ruslan, 2,400 rubles with commission coverage, Guy and gentlemen magicians, to support the movement. Guy Fire. I hope we are now going to break through this wrecking shit with a joint intention. I still constantly switch between the comments and the stream monitor to understand when it fell and what we should read again. So, to know, 5,145 rubles 56 kopecks with commission coverage. About the Unified State exam, gentlemen magicians, chaos turns out to be life, and stability is a gradual death that is already essentially subject to time. And here it is impossible to contrast so. Stability is, of course, always death. That is, it is something frozen, never changing, at the same time. Life is always a process. In other words, the same person is not so much a physical object as a phenomenon, because at each smallest subsequent moment of time, he is very different from himself at the smallest previous moment of time. And even in a few
даже
years,
за
all the
несколько
cells
лет у
of
вас
your body
полностью
completely
все клетки
change.
организма меняются.
You know
Это,
this.
знаешь, вот
Here is a
отсылка к
reference to that
тому
old, like
старому,
this, old philosophical joke about Jason's ship.
старой
That is, when
философской
they change
шутке
it
про
according to the
корабль
order,
Ясона.
and
То
after a
есть, когда в
while,
нем
it turns
поддоступы
out that there
меняют,
is
и
not a
через
single
некоторое
board
время
in this
оказывается,
very
что
Jason's ship,
в
which
корабле
was
этого
from the very
самого
beginning,
Ясона нету
and can it be
ни одной
considered the
доски,
same ship?
которая была с самого начала, и можно ли считать его тем же самым кораблем?
It seems to me that the
Мне
question is
кажется, что
asked in such a
вопрос
way
задан так,
that a
что
person, in
человек, в
principle,
принципе, понимает
understands the
правильный
correct
ответ.
answer. It
Можно,
is possible. It is
можно
possible to
именно
look
так
exactly
смотреть,
like
и это
that,
будет
and it
правильно,
will
потому
be
что
right,
жизнь это
because
тоже именно
life is
хаотический
also a
процесс.
chaotic
То есть
process.
он
That is,
связан,
it is connected, let's say, development itself and life.
скажем
That
так,
is, it
само
implies,
развитие
yes,
и
it
жизнь.
really is
То
chaos.
есть подразумевает, да, действительно хаос.
At
По
least one of
крайней
the
мере, одна
concepts of
из
chaos, so
концепций
to
хаоса,
speak.
можно так сказать.
Just
Просто,
again,
опять
the
же,
definition
определение
of
хаоса
chaos can
может
be
быть
infinite.
различно.
I want to
Я
tell
тебе
you
даже
even
больше
more,
хочу
and he
сказать,
didn't fall from Rome. The
что
fact
для
that in order to emulate something more or less
эмуляции
similar to
чего-то
life,
более-менее
certain
похожего на
accidents are
жизнь,
always introduced into the
всегда в
program code.
программный
That
код
is,
вносят
some kind of chaotic
определенные
processes.
случайности, то есть какие-то именно хаотические процессы.
By the way,
Сама, кстати,
well,
ну,
it's a pretty
довольно
serious
серьезная
problem,
проблема, потому
because there
что
was such a random
на
number
старых
generator
компах
on old
был такой
computers,
генератор
but it was
случайных
always
чисел,
called
но
a
он всегда
pseudo-random
назывался
number
генератором
generator.
псевдослучайных чисел.
And if the
И если
program was
программа
run in a new way
запускалась
each time,
каждый раз
then,
по-новому, то
oddly
он, как
enough,
ни
it
странно,
gave out
выдавал
the
одну и
same
ту же
sequence of
последовательность
pseudo-random numbers.
псевдослучайных чисел.
Then they
Потом
began to
стали
add
добавлять
thermometer data on the processor,
данные
some other data
термометра на
that depended
процессор,
on the
еще
outside
какие-то
world,
данные, которые
and made the
зависели именно от
necessary
внешнего
variety.
мира и вносили необходимое разнообразие.
Let's not get distracted now, otherwise I'm afraid we are somehow. Let's spread our thoughts too far along the tree. So, a dashing mustache, 350 rubles, for the free movement of the assemblage point. Well, the truth is so. And Rhodian skulls, 333 rubles, with a commission covering, to support the Guingai movement. I have heard that new donations have just arrived, but we will now return to the main topic again, and then we will return to them. So, we have sorted out the culture, that is, and now you understand that this is some kind of software that allows you to interact with the real world. So that's it. What is mythology? And mythology is the programming language in which this program is written. And in order to sort it out here, it will be a little more difficult, in my opinion, because for most people, the concept of mythology is primarily connected with religious cults.
Концепция мифологии, она в первую очередь связана с религиозными культами.
But right now, I'm about to admit just such a moment that from the point of view of the gods of chaos, in fact, in this case, that religion and other manifestations of human culture are about the same.
Что религия, что другие проявления культуры человеческой примерно одно и то же.
That is from their bell tower. They, well, for them it's about, you know, a phenomenon of the same order, let's say.
Явление одного порядка, скажем так.
That Morgenstern, that Christianity is one piece of
одна
shit.
хуйня.
Morgenstern is what you mean.
Имеешь в виду,
No, oh,
Нет, я
I don't
имею в
mean a
виду не
medieval weapon,
средневековое
but is there
оружие,
such a
а
famous
есть
rapper
такой,
at the moment?
известный рэпер в текущий момент.
а,
Well,
ну,
I wouldn't really give
я
a
бы
rapper here
не
as an
совсем,
example,
рэпером
but I would
привел
give an
пример, а
example
я бы
of some
привел
Indian
пример
TV
какой-нибудь
series.
турецкий
There's
сериал,
like a
там,
Brazilian
традиционный
TV
сериал.
series. That
То
is
есть,
from the point of view of the
вот
gods
с
of
точки
chaos.
зрения богов
That is,
хаоса, то,
here
что
is human
человеческая
culture,
культура, что
which
то
is a
проявление
manifestation of
человеческой
human
культуры,
culture. That, for
что,
example, the
например,
Bible,
Библия,
Islam,
там,
and
ислам,
Christianity are of the same
христианство,
order of things.
одного порядка вещи.
It is the
Одного
order,
порядка,
because
потому
this
что
is
это
what we will be
уже
talking
то, о
about,
чем мы
at
будем,
least,
по
we will
крайней
touch
мере,
on the
будем
topic when the
затрагивать
gods
в
of
рамках
chaos.
хаоса.
Here these are
Здесь
topics
это
of a
темы
different
другого
order.
порядка.
It's like
Это
this
как
nanomir, or there's a
наномир,
microcosm.
макромир.
And in our,
И
let's say, everyday
в нашем,
phenomenon, the
допустим,
distance is 1
в
meter,
обыденном
and the distance is 100
явлении
meters. And for a state
расстояние
of
1
1,000
метр
meters,
и
the
расстояние
distance
100
is
метров,
10,000
или
meters,
расстояние
is a
1000
big
метров,
difference.
расстояние 10 тысяч метров, большая разница.
And from the
А
point
с
of
точки
view of
зрения
space and the solar
космоса,
system,
Солнечной
it's
системы,
all some kind of
насколько это
trifle.
мелочь.
In other words,
Вот в
in
этом
this sense,
смысле
I just want to say that the phenomenon is of the same order. Well,
Ну,
as
как
for
для
you,
вас там
there is
1
1 by 1
нанометр,
meter,
10
10
нанометров,
nanometers,
1
1
микрометр.
micrometer.
То есть
That
это
is,
что-то
it's something
тоньше
thinner
птички
than an ant's
муравья.
pussy. Why am I saying this when I'm talking about myths? Because here, in human terms, this is a gaping hole. Let's say there is no one for him. That is, for a person, mythology is this or a religious cult, and that's it, in my opinion. Here's a daughter. What associations do you have with the word? There are two options. Either this is some kind of religious cult, a law cultural heritage there, or this is something that scientists must necessarily expose on their program Scientists Against Myths. That's what I don't even want to touch on. This is a deliberate obsession with the topic. That is Scientists Against Myths. It should be properly called Scientists Against the Myths. And this has nothing to do with myths. That is, there really is. I'm considering it. Scientists are not against myths, or scientists are against it. But scientists, in quotes, are fucking on YouTube for the sake of views, let's call it that. For the sake of another cunt. That is, and unfortunately, this is the word myths, especially the concept, no one understands at all. That is, the myth is perceived as some kind of bullshit here. And this is fundamentally wrong, and I am quite upset that I even have to explain these things here. But, unfortunately, it is necessary. That is, here it is necessary to disassemble these Augean stables, the mashing of meanings. In other words, in fact, the myth is exactly the programming language in which human culture is written. And from the point of view of the gods of chaos, the difference is a phenomenon of the same order as other manifestations of world culture. That is this. In other words, you have to understand that this is a completely different order already going on here. I don't know how much I managed to explain it, then maybe I'll remember something else, add something else. But here, it is so important that in fact, a programming language also has a programming language. That is, on what even deeper, let's say. Well, you know there is. Let's be friends, Aptuk. I will again give a technical analogy. Yes, because programming languages, they stand on top of each other. That is, initially everything was programmed directly in machine codes. That is, they prescribed in numbers, which numbers to enter into which processor register, which command to count in numbers. Then, they made a higher level language, which was essentially the same programming in machine codes, just assigned the corresponding understandable spells of 3 letters to the machine code. And after that, already in this programming language, on the sampler, the building of higher languages begins, some kind of C, where C++, C++, and so on and so on. They're ending with some completely abstract languages like Java or Python.
И так далее, там кончая какими-нибудь совсем абстрактными языками, типа Java или Python.
That is, they are all layered on top of each other. No one writes any modern programming language like Python or Ruby using machine codes. They always use at least some C. So, you can say a sampler, on which it is written, even I would not say that human culture, but the person himself, his tone. Well, we can say that the human soul, or in Carlos and Castan, where it will be a tonale. That is, in this case, it is, in this particular case, we can say that it is a one-level concept. Here is the human soul, or tonal. It is written in the language of just archetypes. That is, what Uno consists of the global, or rather global, scenarios of this collective unconscious. It would be wrong here. Here. Well, we can say that this is assembler, or maybe even already, well, rather. Well, let it be assembler, let's say. This is what is the basis of mythology. And culture and everything else is already written on mythology. Here. So, how can this be understood by Tume? That is, how can it be perceived more simply or something? Here are the films of David Lynch, they just show exactly an all. But of course, there is also a zero, with a layering of the human tonal. That is what we are talking about. That is, a dream and a zero. You perceive archetypes directly, but their perception is through your human, through your tonal, and it is more or less unique for each person. But nevertheless, it is not unique, but common, based on its culture. Here. So, if you clear the annul and zero dreams from the human tonal, and here is the purest perception, that's exactly what I'm talking about. In other words, this is the most basic programming language. Here. Well, you can call it well, yes and but, or archetypes and anti-archetypes. Here. And accordingly, these are like the bricks and the main codes that make up the person himself. And not only a person, because there is just a more global relationship involved, which in fact allows you to create worlds, even create different dimensions, all sorts of probabilities. Let's be friends, Apyuk. Again, I will give a certain analogy. The fact is that if you want to write some particularly evil fucking program, as a rule, it is some kind of evil fucking virus that will reach the very bottom of the mechanical guts of your computer, whether you want it or not. You will have to use, as a rule, a sampler. That is, to directly study the features of iron, and directly give these assembler commands, because higher-level languages usually do not allow this. And if you want to become a serious magician who plows through the entire current reality, whether you want it or not, you will have to master the programming language, which we call NO. But this is a very serious feature, as now most programmers in principle do not know any assembler, and are poorly versed in hardware, but they are buying exactly at the very top, according to the so-called, like them, high-level languages. This is where David Lynch's films are good. He shows exactly the original, and it becomes exactly explicit. But of course no one understands its meaning except us, and there is no one else to explain it to. But nevertheless, this is a huge merit, I think, of David Lynch, that he was able to technically, let's say, show Java exactly zero. Here, of course, not pure, but through the layering of his tonal, but as pure as possible, which I would see in general in human art. In other words, we can say that David Lynch, well, this is the coolest mythology, which actually surpasses religious mythology. Surpass all ancient Greek myths. Moreover, I am friends with Apyuk. I suspect that the ancient Greek myths at their core were just something like David Lynch's films. They just reached us in the retelling of retellings, retellings of retellings. Definitely, definitely. Here you also need to take into account that this is an adaptation for. In other words, it is necessary to tell the myth so that it is understandable to a peasant. In fact, it is uncultured. Well, how was he understandable to the one you tell him at all? Here it must be borne in mind that there were also magical orders, just ancient ones, and there they had their own understanding through the mysteries, that is, through magical rituals, they comprehended all this. But what we have recorded and known under the ancient Greek myths is exactly, well, like a Brazilian TV series. That is, there are really mysteries, and there is a Brazilian TV series based on these mysteries. Here. Well, or some Adventure Time, fairy tales for the masses. That is, I want to say, what people comprehended through the mysteries, they tried to convey to the broad masses in the most understandable and accessible language. And they built this language in such a way as to maximize the coverage of all the segments of the population available to them. Here, a good example is the current so-called scientific pop on YouTube, when some complex concepts are being tried to convey to very dim-witted citizens. And the further away, the more feeble-minded. Do not forget about Russian folk tales, it's the quintessence of our mythology, in fact.
нашей мифологии.
It's just that,
Просто нам
again,
ничего,
we
опять
don't
же,
know
неизвестно
anything about the
про
mysteries that were
мистерии,
behind
которые
them.
стояли.
They
Они
definitely
однозначно
exist in
существуют.
hysteria. Plus, we are friends with
плюс,
Aptuk.
дружим
We have
Аптюк, мы
also
еще
lost the
утеряли
keys to
ключик к
understanding these
пониманию вот
most
этих
ancient
самых
Russian
древних
fairy
русских
tales,
сказок,
because they have
потому
been
что их
fucked up
столько
so
раз
many
засирали,
times
что
that you have to
приходится
wade through
продираться
some
через
wildest
какие-то
layers
дичайшие
in order
наслоения,
to
чтобы
understand the
понять
simplest
самые
things.
простейшие
Who
вещи.
is
Кто
Baba
такая Баба
Yaga?
Яга,
Who
кто
is
такой
Serpent
Змей
Goranik?
Горыныч
And
и
why do they
почему они
perform
выполняют
exactly
вот
this
именно эту
sequence of
последовательность
actions?
действий?
What the
Вообще,
fuck are
о
they
чем
about
они,
anyway?
блядь?
And it is precisely
Именно
for
для
this
этого как
that the
раз
dominant
господствующая
mythology of
мифология
Christianity has
христианства
completely cleaned out
полностью
exactly the
защищала как раз вот
esoteric part of
именно
all this.
эзотерическую часть вот этого всего.
И
And shedding
и
exoteric
засирая
including.
экзотерическую в том числе.
Yes,
Да,
yes.
да.
Therefore,
Поэтому
now we can say
сейчас
that
можно
indeed
сказать,
all
что
fairy tales are
все
written by
сказки
Masons,
написаны
because
масонами.
everything that is not
Все, что
written by
написано
Masons
масонами,
is
это
most likely
очень
destroyed,
тоже.
but
Но
it's
это,
like a distraction, not a
как
distraction.
сказать,
But you
отвлечение
have
от
to
отвлечения, но вы
understand this
должны
concept of
понимать
mythology, and what mythology consists of.
вот эту вот концепцию мифологии и из чего состоит мифология. К
Unfortunately,
сожалению,
well, I don't
ну,
even know
вот
how to say it.
даже
On
не
my
знаю,
channel,
как
just
сказать.
what was it called?
На моем канале как раз, как он назывался,
NAF
NAF
TV,
TV,
I
там
analyzed
я
archetypes
разбирал
and
наши цифры, эти
anti-archetypes there,
архетипы.
but this is
Но это,
natural. Let's
естественно,
just say I
скажем так,
analyzed this
это я
10 or
разбирал
more years ago.
10 и больше лет
In
назад.
other words,
Своего
he actually
воспоминания
told
по
his memory
мотивам
based on the
там
motives.
ставил.
That is,
То есть
you need
нужно
to conduct a
провести
new
вот
one. So,
так.
I hope you
Я
can hear
надеюсь,
us
нас
now,
сейчас слышно,
because the
потому
ether
что
was
эфир
falling
опять,
again,
как ни
oddly
странно,
enough.
падал.
Please write in the
Пожалуйста,
chat
напишите,
whether you
опять
can hear us
слышно
or
нас
not.
или нет.
It's been a long
Давненько
time
уже у
since
нас
we've
не
had such a
попадалось
problematic
такого
ether, because as soon as we
проблемного
assembled
эфира,
our
потому
enchanted
что
computer,
как
the
только мы
problems on our
собрали
side
наш
disappeared,
заколдованный компьютер, проблемы на нашей стороне исчезли.
and they decided
Нам
to arrange it
решили
for us on the side of
устроить
YouTube.
на стороне Ютуба.
Let's take a
Давайте
short
мы
break
сейчас
now,
сделаем
literally
небольшой
for 2 or 3
перерыв,
minutes.
буквально на 2-3 минуты.
Stay with us,
Оставайтесь с
we'll be
нами,
back soon.
скоро мы вернемся.
Hello again.
Снова здравствуйте.
Let's be friends,
Давайте,
Aptuk.
Мамтюк, наверное,
We'll probably move on to the main topic after all, because it seems to me we have more or less conveyed what we wanted to say about culture, about programming languages. Let me summarize a little bit.
резюмируя,
In other words,
сама
culture
культура
itself
—
is the
это
development
развитие
of the human mind,
человеческого ума,
tonal,
морали,
adding certain meanings to it, so that it is possible to work together on rather complex operations.
довольно сложных операциях.
Mythology is a programming language like assembler or C, which are layered on top of each other. I mean, do you remember there was a question asked at the very beginning of the broadcast about totems and all that stuff? This is exactly what can be attributed to the category of assembler, that is, to the most basic of some kind of kudu, on which everything further was layered. That is, these Greek gods, all these concepts like then communism, feminism, and other shit. And so, we are talking about the gods of chaos in the context of human culture. How it all refracts through these meanings, which we voiced a little earlier. I wonder at what point the broadcast was interrupted. He broke off just a little bit, at the very last moment. I honestly forgot what I was saying. Yes, let me read out the donations that came to us in time. No, let's not get distracted after all. I'm going to tell you more about biology. What I wanted to tell you anyway is that what David Lynch is good at here, what it shows is almost unchanged. He was able to pull out into reality and zero, and it's kind of understandable for us, because we are magicians and understand this programming language, but let's just say, and for other people it's just a kind of aesthetic pleasure they probably get from watching. Meaningless, because of commands. When someone, for example, clicks the right mouse button on the source code of on some page in the browser, and chooses to show the source code, and looks at these long list of commands, in which he does not understand a damn thing, and thinks fuck some kind of shit. It's just a great comparison, that's really the way it is. But let's just say, this command bar, somehow there, I don't remember which button is called, yes, not only by David Lynch, but in general by many people who are engaged in art. And here, I want to say that for people of art, well, their main feature is that they suddenly show these incomprehensible commands to people. And here, in fact, they themselves, these people of art, do not understand what they are showing. They just have a good connection with the collective unconscious. Here. And when, by the way, people of art try to convey something consciously, it usually turns out some kind of sad crap, that is, sad moralizing, because it is clear from which it is just clear that they really do not understand what they are saying and what they are showing. And here, I want to give advice to all people of art just to create, without thinking about how and why they create. By the way, David Lynch himself says exactly that. That is, he doesn't have any special plan. That is, it's 90% improvisation. How would you put chaos on your soul? Yes, and then it turns out well. But when people of art deliberately try to convey something, it turns out that some kind of sad propaganda, dull propaganda, or dull moralizing. And the fact that people of art are small, let's say, people of intelligence, on the contrary, is good for them. The main thing is that they have a connection with the collective unconscious, which shows very interesting psychedelic and not always understandable things. So these people actually have an aesthetic taste here. And it is very important, that is, unfortunately, many golems simply do not have this aesthetic taste. In other words, they are being explained to them that this is art. They say, yeah, it's art. But they can't distinguish art from non-art at all. Very simply, they can distinguish art from non-art. What is expensive is art, and what is cheap is not art. Well, something
Ну,
like
как-то
that.
так.
In the modern world,
В современном
unfortunately,
мире, к
this is exactly the case.
сожалению,
So it turns out
именно
that
так.
this is a foreign
Вот, и
art. You
получается,
can call it that. It is
что вот это вот
understandable only for
инойное искусство,
magicians.
можно его так назвать, оно понятно только для магов. Вот.
For, let's
Для,
say,
скажем так,
programmers,
программистов
it is at
именно
this
на
basic
этом
level at which
базовом
even the
уровне,
most myths are encoded,
на
that is,
котором
nolo.
кодируются еще самые мифы, то есть НОЛО.
I believe
Вот я
that
считаю,
our main
что
merit
наша вот
is in
главная
this, among
заслуга в
other
том
things.
числе именно в этом,
Because
потому
here,
что
I have
я
not
не
seen
вижу,
anyone for us,
кто-то
before
для
us,
нас, именно
well,
до нас.
maybe
Ну,
this
может
young
быть,
can
там
be
вот
considered there.
Юнга можно
Our
считать.
main
Наша
merit,
главная
Aptuke's
заслуга,
friends,
дружим
is
Аптек,
that
в
we
том,
not
что
only
мы
have a
не только
connection to the
имеем
collective
включение
unconscious,
коллективного
but that we
бессознательного,
still understand,
в том, что
although
мы
you
еще
know, at
понимаем,
the
хоть,
level of a
знаешь, вот на
violin,
уровне
but this
скрипки,
programming
но
language
вот этот
here.
вот язык
That
программирования.
is,
То есть мы
we
не
didn't
просто
just
что-то
look at something,
посмотрели, какие-то
we
куски
swapped some
местами
pieces and
поменяли,
places and
и типа,
like,
о,
oh,
прикольно
it turned
получилось.
out
А
cool.
мы
But at
хотя
least
бы
at a very
на
primitive level,
общепримитивном
we
уровне
understand the
понимаем
interdependence of these fucking teams, and
взаимозависимость
can
вот этих вот
distinguish some
странных
teams a
команд, и
little from
можем
others.
отличать одни команды немножечко от других.
Here's another
Тут
way
еще
to
вот
say
так
it.
вот можно сказать.
When you watch
Когда
a
вы
movie,
смотрите
for
какой-то
example,
фильм,
because now
например,
all
потому
art,
что сейчас
and mostly in the
все
sphere of
искусство
computer games, has
в
moved,
основном
or movies,
в сферу или компьютерных игр переместилось, или фильмов.
that is,
То
they
есть
don't
сейчас
write
уже не
books
пишут
anymore,
книги.
and the pictures are less
Картины
understandable
в
to
меньшей
people.
степени понятны людям.
So,
Так вот,
successful or
успешная или
unsuccessful
неуспешная
is some
какая-то
kind of concept
концепция, что
that it
она
should
должна
catch
цеплять
people.
людей.
And what does it
А за
cling
что она
to? And it
цепляется?
clings
Цепляет она
precisely to
именно
these
как раз за эти
archetypes.
архетипы.
And I think that
Причем
70
я
or
считаю, что
80%
процентов на
unconsciously even.
70-80 бессознательно даже.
When the same modern
Когда вот тот
Hollywood
же самый
starts
современный
promoting its
Голливуд
propaganda,
начинает
it really
продвигать свою
looks sad.
пропаганду, это действительно выглядит уныло.
That is,
То
all
есть
people
все люди
understand
понимают, что
that this
это
is propaganda
пропаганда и что
and
это
something
унылое
sad
говно.
shit. This is when, let's say,
Это
it
когда,
is
скажем так,
intended,
на вере.
but
Но тем не менее,
nevertheless,
все равно
it
это
still
работает.
works.
То
In
есть
other
пропаганда
words,
действительно
propaganda
работает,
really
и
works,
реклама
and
работает.
advertising works.
Но,
But let's just say,
скажем так,
people are not such
люди не
fools.
такие дурачки, они,
At least some small
по
part
крайней
of
мере,
them who
какая-то
are
их
not
малая
naked
часть,
can see the
которая не
difference.
оголемилась,
Даже,
может увидеть
Even
разницу.
those who
те,
are
кто
naked and
оголемились
finished
и
poor-minded,
подверглись к
they do
удовольствию,
not like it
им
simply
это не
because it does
нравится
not cause
просто потому,
emotions.
что это не вызывает эмоций.
Because
Потому
movies,
что
books, paintings,
кино,
and so
книги,
on are
картины и
watched for
прочее
the
все
sake of
это ради
emotions.
эмоций.
And when you
А
are given
когда
a
тебе
summons from the
выдают
Communist Party of the
повестку
Soviet Union
коммунистической
instead of some
партии
interesting
Советского
film, it
Союза
causes
вместо какого-то
despondency. It
интересного
is not
фильма,
interesting to
это
watch,
вызывает
and people
уныние
simply do
смотреть
not
это
pay their
неинтересно,
attention for it.
и люди за это просто не платят своим вниманием.
And it's interesting, respectively, if it's catchy, and it clings to the archetypes, and the archetypes are exactly the new ones. Here, but too concentrated zero is also quite incomprehensible to people. That is, for them it is some kind of. In other words, in order for them to be interested in watching this, they must have a developed aesthetic sense of some kind, which is also naturally not developed by everyone. Here. Well, it's good that at least someone has. In fact, a lot of people like David Lynch, although they don't even fucking understand me. Note that the most interesting thing is that no one understands, but at the same time, he manages to give out millions of dollars to create his paintings.
Для создания своих картин.
Magic.
Магия.
This is the category of what you know. They like to say, if you are such fucking magicians, why don't you win in a casino? Look at David Lynch. David Lynch is doing great here. Here he praised. Although most likely, he also does not quite understand what he is shooting, although he is associated with lucid dreams and magic. That is, he's talking about it directly here. But it is natural that he does not fully understand what he is showing. That is how it is. What I see is what they sing about, and already this is just fine in fact. Here. Right now I'm just thinking whether it's worth moving on to another topic before revealing about the gods of chaos. In other words, it is in fact already a purely magical witchcraft theme. Probably it is worth mentioning it after all, then maybe we will refer to it or repeat this idea again. You know what the most interesting thing is, and this is really very interesting, which in fact most people who will hear it now will find it hard to believe, but it can be checked. So far, this can only be checked by comrades and brothers of Kigali. that is, those who are in the order of Gigai. Here, this is a mythical space. By the way, we forgot to mention a little bit. We mentioned fairy tales, but there are also modern fairy tales, that is so-called fantasy, or such fantastic literature, which from the point of view of archetypes is about the same thing. What's the difference between fantasy or science fiction? So their archetypes pop up in the same way, only of course they pop up outside the will of those who write it. Let's just say they broadcast again the collective unconscious, to which they can connect. So, this is the space of mythology. It is not only in our head. In other words, this is exactly what Castaneda calls magical thinking. And it's actually not that difficult. That is, technically it is not so difficult. With the help of some rituals, move your assemblage point into magical thinking and get literally into a fairy tale. That is, what you encounter when reading fairy tales. You can literally get into it with your body just to move into this magical dimension. In other words, it is quite feasible. And I want to notice, simple. The only difficulty here is that you can very quickly squeeze out your energy there, and all sorts of devils and demons, so to speak, mess up your brains and... Well, by the way, it's not any easier than you can squeeze out all the energy of the devil and the devil to muddle your brains in the so-called everyday life. Will you go out to the store in some nearby one, be sure to make you put on a muzzle or do some other bush twice. Well, let's just say there's nowhere exactly a reserve of personal power is needed. Here. And here it is just possible to refer again to Pelivan's last book, where it just describes the process of how a certain scant-witted woman just gets into magical reality with the help of a cross. It's not that difficult. That is, almost everyone can perform, well, similar rituals, and suddenly there will be gods, demons, magical orders of all sorts in his life. That is, it's about like with Harry Potter. That is, once, and you can go through the wall and get into the magic. From the category, you know, we are friends with apt, as in most. As in the lives of most citizens, there are, for example, Putin, the Fed, this Trump, and so on. So, instead of Trump, Putin and frescoes will be gods, all sorts of devils, demons and demons, which are much more real than these inventions of media systems. That is, it is quite possible to get into a fairy tale. It is quite possible. Only it will be a Russian folk tale. Read the unadapted versions before you get into it. It is not necessary, even if you have not read Russian folk tales about some fantasy, that is, you can somehow get into this world, and it would be quite desirable to interact with it adequately. By the way, I thought that such rituals would be available even for participants in principle, initially, and then sooner or later, we will send them to open access. But considering that, in fact, not all comrades can take advantage of this correctly. That is, we will wait. We will wait for a certain amount of time, and the main thing is that you know the safety technique. The main thing you need to work out, because without safety precautions, sending to the magical world is more likely to be the final stop of ward number 6. And this is a very large, let's say, probability. That is, and as I understand it, well, not even what I understand, but more experience tells me, communicating with such people who fall into fools, that is, it really is the way it is. That is, there is not enough simple personal power, and they become out of this fairy tale, they do not control this fairy tale themselves. But let's say, a goblin or a demon twisted them. That's how this Agent Cooper is approximately. Here, on this topic, by the way, I can recommend all listeners to play the computer game Alice in American Maggie.
Эллисон American McGee.
It has two parts, to play, well, any one that you like best, and it's better to play both. So it seems to me that you will understand more what we want to tell you. Now, it just needs to be mentioned that this fairy tale mythology is not just a mind game. No, it's really a parallel reality. So, by the way, I read about such a theory that they say, how can I say it, in this antiquity, or when these ancient Greek myths were written, all people were schizophrenics, and really heard the voices of the gods and accordingly executed their commands. Again, let's recall Pelivan here, as if this is also good, and the first season of this Wild West world. Here. Do not think that this is just some abstract psychological knowledge. No. That is, here we are at a certain level of the assemblage point position, and here is one reality. They are so far away, let's say very close, that well, in a couple of steps, let's say so, and there is no special difficulty to get there. It's just that it's quite dangerous, and that's why we are still in the public domain for such rituals, and even for the participants we will not, let's say, broadcast yet. You just need to understand that yes, these are not just some fairy tales, but you can quite get into these fairy tales. I probably won't tell you the details now. We need to move on to the main topic, if we have enough strength, let's say. Let me still read out the donations. We will make such a kind of break, have a little distraction, and then move on to the main topic. So, the low skill is 777 rubles with commission coverage. Guigao, Gai. New Age, 230 rubles with the cover of the Guigai, Geigel commission. Alexander Inc., 500 rubles with commission coverage. I support the intention of Zagoi Gai for the power of awareness down with the insectoids. Down with the insectoids. Ilya Dem, 230 rubles. Mr. McGee, I'm interested in your opinion about the Institute of Anthropogenesis, if suddenly you know if they are pests. I have never encountered the Institute of Anthropogenesis. Similarly, Slur, 230 rubles, to support Guigai's ether. Well, then we have already read everything. Let's actually move on to the most interesting topic. Wait until we cross over, we just got another donation. We will read it out, and then we will move on. The discretionary fee is 230 rubles with commission coverage. Guigea, thank you for your work, although so far with a small investment. Gaya Gui, by the way, you don't need to consider your investments as some small ones, because even a like is actually a serious feat. So well, as our practice shows, most of the people who watch us don't even like us. And at least some stirring in support of our movement is actually a serious contribution. No kidding. Moreover, the like here is not needed for YouTube, but it is needed for us. Yes, because YouTube just can't be confused by these likes under our videos. But YouTube in general, specifically lately, he has some kind of fucked up. That's after they switched to this new one. They have it there. It's easy to switch to a new interface to some new things. But by the way, it's not just us, it's all streamers who have such an ass. Let's move on to the gods of chaos and human culture, directly to Lovecraft and Warhammer. Yes, why and there was my actual reference, at the very beginning of the stream, of the Rosafila wire in the wall clock. Yes, Lovecraft is a very good example of the perception of the gods of chaos from the context of modernity. The transition to postmodernism, let's say. Human culture has developed very much, and finally, a person realized that maybe he is not the main one here, that in front of this vast universe, he is just a grain of sand. Here. And naturally, the anthropocentric, let's say, model of the universe, which established Christianity and the entire Christian culture, and in fact post-Christian, fails here.
дает здесь сбой.
There are civilizations that have existed for hundreds of millions of years, having some kind of total superiority over humanity.
Имеющие, тотальное какое-то превосходство над человечеством.
And Mr. Lovecraft perceives all this through the prism of horror.
Через призму ужасов.
That is, for him, as for a man of modernity, moving into postmodernism, it's all terrifyingly scary. But at least he is. You see, because he was brought up precisely on this anthropocentric Renaissance culture. In other words, a person is the measure of everything. In the center of the universe, there is a person. And then it turns out that a person, compared to what he sees, and he was exactly a visionary. It's just not even that some kind of flea, just some kind of, I don't know, podzalupная dandruff. I'm going to tell you now how I see it. We will have the following airs, which will explain what the truth is, what is the truth and the lie, and the truth once again additionally, because you can't do without it. I want to say that the whole thing is not that human culture is an achievement, but that humanity can achieve as much as possible. It has even ceased to be humanity. It begins to furrow the expanses of the galaxy, changing universes according to its wool. It will still remain about a small lint and on the paw of a neurototep who looks at it all. That's it. And our current situation, it's more like, a micro droplet on this lint on a roltotep. In other words, we have not revealed our potential, but in general. That is, we are on the minimox, let's say. I mean, that's just Lovecraft. He found this turning point of the era. The turning point of epochs from pure modernity. Do you know what the humor is? Lovecraft found just the peak of human development. That is when here. Exactly. Scientific and technological progress was in full swing. There were constantly some discoveries. The development of mankind was going on, and it had not yet begun to sink into the current depths of degradation. Yes, degradation did not begin, but the rate of development only increased, and it seemed that everything could be achieved, let's say. Man is not the measure of everything, but the absolute master of nature. And then just like that, since the man was, as it were, a visionary, he showed it very well. But he was formed in that era. He is everything that is beyond the human scale, everything that is beyond the human mind, or rather, what is besides the mind. There is also a non-human mind, and it is more developed, and non-human mind, and non-human civilizations. And they have a huge scale, and the person here is just a grain of sand. He can't perceive it in any other way than through horror. For him, it's well fucked up, which he wants to see. That is, he understands more. We are friends of Aptuk. Do not forget that this is the peak of colonization development, that is, when white gentlemen came on armored dreadnoughts and forced some savages to wear all sorts of nice things to them with the help of the power of their guns. And he understood perfectly well that if we surpass them so much and do this to them, then what will these people do to us, who surpass us 100 and 500 million times more than we do them?
100-500 миллионов раз, чем мы их.
Yes. Well, here you can certainly cling to some particulars. Ask questions specifically about Lovecraft. Well, I don't know my daughter. I don't know what else you can add to Lovecraft. Besides the fact that he is a man of his era, it is for him that the gods of chaos are like something terrible from above, which I would rather have seen and never seen. That is, I'm the only thing. For comments, I want to say now, please write on the topic, because of this constantly crumbling ether, attention is constantly switching. When you start communicating with each other, writing some abstract comments, it's very confusing. Please write on the topic. We have thematic lectures. We do not have an entertainment broadcast. When something goes beyond anthropocentrism, it seems terrible that you want to see it and forget it altogether. That, I think, is the whole point of Lovecraft. Here maybe someone else wants to add something, I do not know, another ray. Well, that's exactly how I perceive Lovecraft's mythology. Well, it's also worth taking into account that Lovecraft was a little outdated, even in its time. He was brought up in a very, very traditional state, in a very traditional family, and in fact, he is not even a child of the 20th century, but of the late 19th. And that's why he perceived everything in this way, because he lived in the postmodern era, and in his head, he had a picture of the world of classical modernism, and this made him even stronger. He lived just at the turning point, at the transition. At the turning point, at the transition. But it's already the 20s, already there he's approaching a little bit in what? In the 37th year, in my opinion, he died. Well, look, daughter, and the beginning of postmodernism is at best, it's just the First World War. And this is the 13th year. In other words, it turns out that he is not only at a turning point, but also a little bit behind the current model in his picture of the world. And this added to his horror of what was happening. By the way, no one like Lovecraft, that is, he had, as it were, imitators, continuators, but none of them could convey this very chthonic horror. And when I read Lovecraft here, it doesn't seem to me at all a special kind of horror. That is, well, it seems to me, this is the norm. The funny thing is, we've been living in a much more terrible world for a long time than the one he was trying to describe. And the one that he is, the world that he describes, he's so, you know, warm, lamp-like and pleasant. Where are these mushrooms from, Yuget? I may be getting a little ahead of myself, but I want to say that from the point of view of the metamodern in which we live, the gods of chaos are just the norm. This is the norm. There's nothing terrible about it anymore. That is, we can perceive them as they are, and without being particularly frightened, and without getting lost from fear under the bed, let's say, and not trembling, that's it. Not wanting to see what we see, but on the contrary, let's do it again, let's do it again. Here. Well, and here it will be just possible to go to the Warhammer. Here, and Warhammer is a pure child of the postmodern, and the gods of chaos are perceived precisely from the point of view of the postmodern. That is, there is some kind of chaos, it is terrible, evil, terrible, but it is already understandable. That is, there are some people fighting for him. That is, the Primarchs. Everything is perfectly described there. That is, chaos in the Warhammer universe 40,000 is exactly what you say, but what you call evil, only in the understanding of the average golem. That is, it's something like a kind of subconscious according to Jung, through which spaceships skip, gaining this whole cunt from people, and giving this cunt to hatches, and the most unstable people get it and slip into our reality and arrange trash, fucked up and sodomy here.
Ей набираются и проскакивают в нашу реальность и устраивают здесь трэш, пиздец и содомию.
It's interesting you described everything. Here's what I want to say. First of all, chaos is represented there as quite a country of conflict. That is, they even have some logic there, although it is described that they are all fucking crazy there. But fuck, these fucking crazy people act in approximately the same framework that, well, they are fighting. And I'll explain to you why they act in such a framework. Because they take a cast of those who slip through this chaos. That is by itself. He is there as if nothing in this universe, but these different civilizations, jumping through this chaos, leave their impression on him, and he begins to play along with them as it were. In other words, it is the collective unconscious, it is not even chaos in fact. That is, they mean in the Warhammer universe, 40,000 by chaos. Exactly. The collective unconscious is exactly, and this is not the same, far from the same. By the way,
Кстати,
yes,
да,
the concept of
концепция
pure
именно
chaos,
чистого хаоса, к
unfortunately,
сожалению,
in the
в
Warhammer
истории
universe,
Warhammer,
well,
ну,
practically I didn't notice it.
практически я вот не
Maybe
заметил.
it
Может
slips
быть, оно
as an
как
additional meaning or an
дополнительным
additional
смыслом
hint.
или дополнительным намеком
But here I
проскакивает.
want
Но
to
здесь я
say,
хочу
to
сказать,
note
отметить, что
that
в эпохе
in the
постмодерна
postmodern era,
хаос уже
chaos already
вполне
quite
себе
exists.
существует.
Oh,
Вот.
about what I forgot to
Просто
say about
забыл сказать
Lovecraft.
про Лавкрафта.
From
С
Lovecraft's
точки
point of
зрения
view,
Лавкрафта
there really
никаких
are
богов
no
хаоса на
chaos
самом деле не
gods. He
существует.
invented
Он
them.
их придумал.
That is,
То
he
есть
always
он
said this,
всегда
that
вот
I
это
was the
говорил,
one,
что
just invented them
я
like that.
это самое, просто их так
He was
придумал.
tough.
Он был
He
жестким
even,
Ему даже признать,
материалистом.
to admit the existence of the
ему
gods of
признать
chaos to him
существование богов
is,
хаоса,
well,
это,
that's
ну,
right,
прямо
that's
вообще
completely
полный
fucked up.
пиздец.
That is,
То
he
есть
was
он
fantasizing,
фантазировал,
although it's clear
хоть
that he
он
was
видно, что
scared
был
shitless
дурачком,
and
боялся,
absolutely.
стопудово,
That
потому
is,
что он
he used
употреблял
some
какие-то
substances,
вещества,
probably
наркотики.
opium, here,
Вот.
but for him it
Но для
was
него
just
это было именно
hallucinations. In
галлюцинации.
other
То есть,
words, in the concept, in the
концепции
fresco,
на
let's say
фреске,
so,
скажем так, вот,
there
глобальной
simply cannot be any
человеческой
gods of
культуры.
chaos in the global human
Модерна
culture of
богов хаоса
modernity.
просто быть никаких не может.
And if they
Даже
are,
если они
then it's
есть,
just
Дружим,
some
то это
kind of
просто
horror
какие-то
stories.
страшилки.
Aptuk,
Дружим Аптюк,
this is
это
reflected
отражено
in
как
his
раз в
works.
его произведениях.
That is, on the
То
one
есть
hand,
он, с
he
одной
sees
стороны,
something
видит
terrible,
что-то страшное,
but even here
но
are
даже
his
вот его
heroes.
герои,
Here are the
в
heroes of
его
his work.
произведениях,
They
они
say,
говорят,
no, no,
нет,
no,
нет, нет,
this
этого
does
не
not exist.
существует.
I'm
Я
going
сейчас
to
закрою
close my
глазки,
eyes
и
now,
чего я не
and what I
вижу,
don't
того
see is
на
actually
самом
not
деле
there.
и нету.
That is, from the point of
То есть
view
вот
of
с точки
Lovecraft,
зрения
that is,
Лавкрафта, то есть
all
все
these
эти
gods
боги
of chaos
хаоса это
are
какие-то
some kind of
страшные
scary
бабайки,
babaki,
которые вот
who
как
just
вот
like the
пионеры
pioneers
собрались
gathered
и
and told
рассказывали
each other
какие-то
horror
страшные
stories to younger
более
pioneers,
младшим
which is
пионерам.
really
Это
fucking scary
реально
if you imagine
страшные,
what it is. It's
представить
terrible.
вещи, это
But no,
ужасно.
oh,
Но нет,
not a
это
fig.
просто
It's just a fairy
сказка
tale
про
about a
бабайку-бабайку.
babika like that.
Вот.
Here. But in the
А
post-montage
вот
of the universe
посмотреть
40,
от вселенной
chaos fights do not
40К,
exist,
боги
but there,
хаоса
by the
не
way,
то, что
it is
существуют, а там,
supported
кстати говоря,
that in fact
поддерживается.
house
На
and
самом
strew
деле,
fights,
боги
that
хаоса
is,
и
they are
стру,
real,
то есть
the
они
only real
настоящие,
ones, but
единственные
they are still
реальные.
perceived in the
Но
paradigm
все
as
равно
something.
воспринимаются в парадигме как
Well,
нечто
it's made up.
Это же
страшное,
придумка.
No, oh,
ужасное.
Нет,
it's
это на
actually
самом деле
also an
тоже
invention.
придумка.
It's
Это
a
же
computer
компьютерная
game.
игра.
First a
Сначала
board game,
настольная игра,
then a
потом
computer game.
компьютерная игра.
What the fuck
Что
are
вы
you
нам
telling us
хуйню
about a
какую-то
board game?
рассказываете про настольную игру?
And here it's just possible to remove it, namely, to consider it from the point of view of mythology, and from the point of view of this particular myth, where everyone exists the universe of the magpie. There it's all more or less real, let's say. And if you dive into this universe a little bit, it turns out that the same Imperium, well, which of course is written off from the Roman Empire, it is no less cruel, no less disgusting than all the other characters in this universe.
Жестокий, ничуть не менее отвратительный, чем все остальные персонажи этой вселенной.
That is, with the ever-living Lenin, who demands constant sacrifices for himself, because there, according to their mythology, for example, in order to open beacons that allow these warp engines to travel, you need to sacrifice psychers.
Нужно приносить в жертву псайкеров.
That is, it is stated there in plain text.
Это прямым текстом заявляется.
All the same, these are ancient races that also arrange, no less chthonic fucked up, going back to that comment, for which we had the ether fall 3 times. Yes, yes. Now I'm going to tell you what I was hooked on by the Warhammer universe in general. Before, I didn't pay any attention to her at all. When I paid attention to it, first of all, I was more impressed, first of all, by the personality of the Emperor himself, and secondly, by the Imperiums. I realized that this is, well, almost a perfect reflection of the mythological human society, that is, hyperreality. In other words, this is actually how it all works. Corrupt, rotten worship, fuck, the great Lenin, who lies in the mausoleum, which most likely has not been there for a long time. That's the fuck, and that's who caused me the most, let's say, that's who I would like to be in the Empire. In the world of Warhammer, that is, their fucking Inquisitors rule just incredibly. That is, first of all, they have complete ideological freedom. That is, they do what they want. And if someone there confessed such thoughts out of adversity, they would immediately kill him as a heretic. They have complete freedom. They do what they want. They destroy entire worlds, not just worlds, entire sectors. In other words, our Shniki and Comrade Putin, let's say, can only envy them there. In other words, in this bureaucratic rotten universe, they do whatever they just want in their hearts. That is this. Well, not only does the Inquisition exist there, there is a very good balance of power there. That is, there are technocrats, servants of the omniscient, the ecclesiarchy, that is, the church, someone else, I don't remember. That is, quite actually it is like this. A very developed myth.
развитый миф.
Very developed, and it reflects reality. That is, approximately so it still exists. There is actually a pope here, there are these orders. But the Inquisition does not officially exist now, or maybe it does exist. But how do you try to fuck something that falls under the 282nd article, and find out if there is an Inquisition or not? No, oh, I mean that there are Jesuits here, and this is really a powerful special service that rules everything and continues to rule. Here. That is here. That is Rome. This Rome, from which the Imperium is written, it has not disappeared. Rome continues to exist even now in our country. And just like that, the Warhammer Empire shows very well, exactly our existing reality. Well, that's exactly the concept of the myth. In other words, this is about how it all exists. There are a lot of many forces for the scant-minded of this single empire of some kind. It's true that now we have a single empire, but it doesn't seem to exist, but he's slowly falling to pieces. Here. Well, in this sense, human society and the social constructs by which human society is governed are just perfectly shown. That's what the universe is good for. That's what I liked and like about her the most. But what I didn't like was how they show the Hussites and the gods of chaos. That is, it can be seen there, let's say so, our universe exists, yes, where we do not go out into any warp. We have not learned to move between planets, between galaxies, with the help of the astral, let's say. Here. And you imagine this, well, this phenomenon, from the point of view of the gods of chaos, which exists in this world. That is, all of a sudden some fucking cockroaches in your house start crawling, fucking, opening portals, climbing somewhere about their business, fucking something, breaking something, eating something. Fuck. They are on your territory. You have the first desire to suppress them all or throw some poison to them. So, in the Warhammer universe, there, just when people learned to travel with the help of the warp, they climbed into someone else's territory. And from the point of view of the creatures on whose territory they have climbed, they are just cockroaches who are engaged in a crisis. That is, they are either crushed or poisoned with some kind of muck. They began to poison them. They were given a classic poison, which now managed to lime cockroaches. That is, how did they try to harass cockroaches before? They were thrown all sorts of muck, from which they immediately died. It didn't help much, because they breed very quickly. They began to be fed poison, which kills them slowly. That is, cockroaches who have drunk poison come to their nest and spread this poison further, and the whole nest dies out from it. This is exactly how the Chaos Gods act in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. And it acts completely from their point of view, fairly, that is, they get in the way. That's how you will treat cockroaches, or some ants or bedbugs, who suddenly appeared at you, running back and forth, eating something. That's the only way to give them some kind of poison. And it turns out that the cults of the gods of chaos are exactly a distorted poison. That, take a break there quickly. And don't climb here anymore. Here. Don't call here again, bitch. Here's what else can I add. It may be about the personality of the Chaos Gods of Warhammer themselves there. They are quite different from the gods of Gigar, but just a different grid, let's say, perception. There is something similar. That is, do you understand? When we are going to tell the Chaos Hangers about each Chaos God, you will already understand it in more or less detail. Now here I am. Well, there are quite interesting concepts of these Chaos Gods. You can see them there. Indeed, they are basic. It's just that they're, let's say, the person who described really saw something like that, but described it through the prism of his tonal. Here, I have a slightly different perception, And here I now don't even see the point of particularly sorting out heresy or not heresy, but to explain exactly the motivation. Imagine why now, if let's say, with the help of some Mikhail Raduga, he issues a grant somewhere in Skokovo or I don't know, the Pentagon. He will invent Hovens, with the help of which you can send people to Inu there, or to the astral, and they will start doing some shit en masse in this Australia. Me. 4. Putin or Trump to agitate, for example, I'm 100% saying it, I'm just saying it. It's not that, but I know it because, well, I know 100%. The gods of chaos will fucking try to get rid of this shit. But I'm explaining. In other words, you have a certain route in your space. In other words, you are used to everything being in its place somehow, everything is working more or less normally, and suddenly some kind of fuck appears here a law, and starts to suffer some kind of shit. Something is starting to eat your bedside table, climb into your very TV, and chew the wires there. That is, your only desire will be to kill them all, and suppress them to hell. That is in our reality. If the Purwits start sending Purwits en masse to Anal and Astral, they will get the same thing as the universe in the Arcaner. And from the point of view of, let's say, the gods of chaos, and in general any entities of the other and the astral, they will be absolutely right. Fuck, why do we need some poor-minded people here, who are engaged in some nonsense? They shit on our sandwich, and chew through the wires in the TV, from which he catches a fucking program. Let's be friends, Aptuk. I'll read out the donations that came after all, because we delayed the transfer very much. Then if anything we will release additional heirs. So, Vlad 230 rubles. Goy guy, thank you for the stream, strength. Good luck and health to you gentlemen magicians. Tell me, why are the chaos gods good? You see, good or bad is solely a matter of evaluation. That is, someone is good, someone is bad. And why this is good or bad for us personally, I think we will reveal on the air about the gods of chaos, the hangers of chaos. Let this not be considered a tautology. Irina of Bal Square, 999 rubles, with commission coverage. Guigea, we support the ether with intent. Gah. The descriptor is 230 rubles with commission coverage. Guigai, thank you for your work, although so far with a small investment. So, this is what we read out, in my opinion. So, I'm now moving on to reading the questions from the chat. Please, when you ask questions in the chat, stick to our main line, because it is very difficult for us. That is, if you write something off topic, we just waste our mental resources and skip unnecessary questions. And then it will be, how to say it, less useful for you to listen to this broadcast. And let me rewind right now, not very far, because our ether was constantly falling. There are a lot of garbage answers and questions. So, gentlemen magicians, why is Lovecraft's Hastur bad? I listened to Lovecraft's stream through the ass. I like Hastur on the contrary, since he is the Lord of Thunder and Lightning. Hastur is not a Lovecraft character at all. It is a character in the universe of a literary game that Lovecraft tried to include, including his mind, and that very rational grain, and not his visionary. And when you reach certain practices, reading Lovecraft, you will understand where he described what he sees, and where he tried to compose. So, this question reminded me of a very interesting concept that I want to tell. The fact is that chaos in its definition is almost limitless. And it is possible to give an infinite number of descriptions of chaos. Here. And we, explaining the concept of Gai, are actually just beginning to explain it. We are just creating this sect, a grid of meanings through which you can catch and understand these details, so that you understand what the gods of chaos are after all. But we do not pretend that we will explain everything at all. We, I will even, on the
Я
contrary,
буду даже
prompt,
наоборот им
explain,
подсказывать,
we
им
limit.
сказать, мы
But
ограничиваем.
even
Но
this
даже вот это
limitation, it
ограничение,
completely
оно
surpasses
полностью
the entire
превосходит
human culture
человеческую
by many
культуру
orders
на
of
много
magnitude.
порядков.
But we
Но
naturally cannot
охватить
cover
весь
all the
хаос
chaos
своими
with our
описаниями, естественно,
explanations.
не можем.
Maybe
Может быть,
someone
кто-то
better than us will
лучше
do
нас
it.
это
It's
сделает.
not at all,
Или
but in a
Вообще
different
ничего
way.
человеческих
In the
по-другому.
forces,
силах,
it is
не
not
в
humanly possible
человеческих
to
силах
grasp the whole
охватить
concept
вообще
of
всю
chaos at all.
концепцию
In
хаоса.
other
То
words,
есть вот
that's how
насколько у
much
нас
health we have
здоровья
enough,
хватит,
so we will cover
настолько
it in
мы
general.
вообще это и охватим.
That is,
То есть
those who will
те, кто
follow us
потом
later,
пойдут за
we
нами, мы
hope that they will
надеемся,
follow us
они
and will
за
not
нами
carry some
пойдут,
kind of
будут
heresy,
нести
but will continue our
пользу,
work,
а
and they will
продолжат
be
наше
able to
дело, и
develop
они
this
смогут
concept
развить
and
эту
promote it more
концепцию,
into
больше
human
её
culture.
продвинуть именно в человеческую
And
культуру,
here is more
вот
to
больше
promote our
продвинуть
reality to the
нашу
territory
явь
of Navi.
к территории Нави.
Gentlemen magicians
Господа
read
маги,
that
читал,
Lovecraft
что
caught the
Лавкрафт
horrors of the
застал
First
ужасы
World
Первой
War.
мировой
It
войны,
moved
это
his
ничего
assemblage point a
изменило
lot,
точку
so he
сборки,
was
поэтому
able
он
to
смог
see what
увидеть
was
то, что
behind the
писали,
clock.
что
What do
об
you
этом
think about
говорили.
it? What the fuck does
Какая
it matter
нахуй
what moved
разница,
his
что
assemblage point?
сдвинуло его точку сборки?
This is the first
Это
thing.
во-первых.
Secondly,
Во-вторых, как
how
он
could he
мог
capture
захватить
the horrors
ужасы
of the
Первой
First
мировой
World
войны,
War if
если
he
он всегда
always
жил в
lived in
каком-то
some minor
заштатном
state of
штате
America
Америки
and did not participate in any
и в
wars?
никаких войнах не участвовал?
This again,
Это
only in
опять
the
какие-то
newspapers.
Только по
Yes,
газетам.
Да,
I
это
didn't
как
even
да,
read it
даже не
on
по
TV in the
телевизору, в
newspapers.
газетах
That is,
читал.
it's some
То есть это
kind of,
опять какие-то,
these
знаешь, вот эти
motherfuckers,
пиздоболы,
motherfuckers.
культурологи,
Culturologists are
пиздоболы,
trying to tell
культурологи,
something to justify their
что-то
existence
пытаются
and a bowl
рассказать,
of this
чтобы
soup that is
оправдать свое
poured for them every
существование
day.
миску этого супа, который им каждый день наливают.
A bowl of elephant
Миску
shit,
говна,
actually.
слоника, на самом
Мгм.
деле.
Gentlemen magicians,
Господа маги,
in the
в
picture
картине
of dear
Лавкрафта
Lovecraft,
хаос равно
chaos is
непознаваемое,
equally
но
unknowable.
суть
Is this
хаоса
the
или
essence of
качество?
chaos or the qualities of chaos? First of all,
Во-первых,
Lovecraft
сам
himself, in
Лавкрафт,
my
он,
opinion,
по-моему,
he
слово
never
хаос
really used the
никогда
word
особо не
chaos.
употреблял.
He just fucked
Он
with what he
просто
saw
охуевал с
and
того, что он
understood
видел,
that it was
и
beyond the
понимал, что
current
это
human
находится за
perception.
пределы
But at the
текущего
same time, he
человеческого
described only what he
восприятия,
could
но при
cover
этом
with his
описывал
human
он только
perception.
то, что своим человеческим восприятием мог охватить.
Therefore, he
Поэтому
generally
он
snatched off
такие
such
вообще
crumbs
крошки
and described them.
отхватывал и
In
описывал.
other words, he
То есть он это
described it.
описывал,
Note that what
заметьте.
does not
То,
lend
что
itself to
не
human perception,
поддается
in
человеческому
principle,
восприятию, в
cannot be
принципе
described.
описано быть не может.
That is,
То есть он
according to our
по
current standards
текущим
of consciousness,
нашим меркам
he described
сознания
such
описывал
primitive things in
вот такие
general,
вообще
from which it
примитивные
makes no
вещи,
sense to be
от
afraid.
которых не
But
то, что
well,
пугаться
everything is just
смысла не
clear
имеет,
thanks to the
а
further development of
просто
culture.
все и понятно благодаря именно дальнейшему развитию культуры.
This is also an
Вот
important
как раз
point.
тоже важный момент.
In fact,
На
the
самом деле,
Gigali
движение
movement and the
Гуйгая,
Gigali order
орден
could not have
Гуйгая,
existed in the postmodern
не
era.
мог бы существовать в эпохе постмодерна.
In other words,
То есть он
it can
может
exist in
существовать
the
в
era
эпохе
of metamodern,
метамодерна,
which has
которая
already begun.
началась уже.
Only for me, it
Только
started
для меня
there
она
in the
началась
year
там в году
2006-2007,
2006-2007,
and for
а
most
для
people,
большинства
it's
людей
just
это
now
вот
with the
уже
coronavirus, as it were,
коронавирусом
it
как бы
began.
началось.
The metamodern front is
Метамодерновый
one.
фронт един.
Something like that.
Как-то так.
Here.
Вот.
What I'm saying is
Я
that
о
in the
чем говорю,
metamodern,
что
all
в
this is normal,
метамодерне всё
and you
это
can
норм.
talk about it,
И
and it
можно
will
про это
even be
говорить, и это
understandable.
будет даже понятно.
That is, even
есть
in the
ещё в
postmodern
эпохе
era,
постмодерна
we talk
говорить
about the
про
gods of
хаос, но
chaos,
это
but this is in the context of some
в
kind of
контексте
role-playing
какой-то
game.
ролевой
Well,
игры.
Ну,
imagine,
представь,
for
например,
example,
какой-нибудь
some
80-й
80th
год,
year.
это же
It's
даже
not
не
even the context of
какой-то
some
ролевой
role-playing
игры, а
game, but
какой-то,
some you
знаешь,
know. Thrash horror movie
трэш-ужастик
of Ben's
категории
category,
Б,
which was
который сразу
immediately released
выпускался
on
на
Hive from
VHS
cassettes.
кассетах.
Now, and now
Вот.
it's
А
not
сейчас
over
это
yet,
еще
but
не
it's
до
just
конца, а
beginning,
только
let's say, due to the
начинается,
fact
скажем
that the
так,
era
вот
has
насчет
changed.
того, что
I think
эпоха
you know.
сменилась.
Here are our streams. They will
Я
be
думаю,
really
опять же,
relevant maybe only
наши
in
стримы,
10,
они
12
будут
years.
по-настоящему актуальны, может, лет только через 10, через 12.
And at the same
И при
time,
этом
no
про нас
one will
еще никто
remember
не
about us
вспомнит, все
yet.
будут нас
Everyone will
пересказывать
retell
с
us with
умными
clever
ебалами, как
fuckers,
будто
as
сами
if they
этого не
invented it
думали.
themselves. Well, I hope that
Надеюсь,
somehow
что
it's the
всё-таки,
same. Well, I
Ну,
hope
я
we are by
надеюсь, мы к
then.
тому
Already,
времени,
we are friends
дружим
Opyuk.
Опюк, я надеюсь,
I
к
hope
тому
by that
времени
time,
разовьемся
we will have
достаточно,
developed
чтобы
enough
тем,
so that those
кто
who will
будет
tell with a
рассказывать
clever
с умным
fuck,
ебалом,
as if
как
he
он
had
это
come up
сам
with it
будет
himself,
придумать,
our
приходили
adherents
наши
will come
адепты
and bring
и
them
выносили им
enlightenment with a
просветление с
bamboo
помощью
stick on the
бамбуковой
head.
палки по голове.
All right,
Ладно.
let's not
Не
dive into
будем
these sweet
погружаться в
dreams.
эти сладкие грезы.
Gentlemen magicians,
Господа
can we
маги,
assume
можно ли
that
считать,
David
что
Lynch
Дэвид Линч
and
и
Stephen
Стивен
King
Кинг
are now
сейчас
playing the
играют
role
роль
of Lovecraft?
Лавкрафта?
Well,
Ну,
David Lynch, he spits
Дэвид Линч,
Lovecraft,
он
and Stephen
переплевывает
King,
Лавкрафта, а
well,
Стивен
do not
Кинг,
overestimate him.
не стоит
This
его
is an
переоценивать.
ordinary
Он
writer.
обычный
Even
писатель.
he does not write
Это
horror
даже
films.
он не
He
ужастики
actually
пишет,
paints
он
the
на
life
самом
of the
деле
middle class of the United States
живописует
of America.
быт среднего класса Соединенных Штатов Америки. Такой вот.
He paints the life of the
Живописует
outback of the USA.
жизнь глубинки США.
I'm often
Ну
advised to
вот
read Stephen King's
часто этого
stories,
Стивена Кинга как бы советуют почитать его рассказы,
but somehow I
но
don't get
как-то
it
до него
right.
не доходит
And
этот
what I
самый.
tried to read
То, что я
doesn't
пытался
seem
читать,
interesting
мне
to
не
me.
кажется
There are
интересным.
no
Там
horrors
нет
there,
никаких
you know,
ужасов. Это, знаешь,
something
что-то
like
типа
Gone with the
«Унесенных
Wind,
ветров»,
only
только
Gone with the Wind,
«Унесенных
only
ветров»
from the
только
80s,
из
90s.
80-х, 90-х.
Read it, for
Почитай
example,
«Оно»,
Stephen
например,
King.
Стивена Кинга.
There are no
Там
horrors there,
ужасов никаких
it's the
нет,
purest.
это чистейшее...
By the way,
Оно,
I read
кстати, я
it.
читал.
Well, that's it.
Ну вот,
Maybe the
это
only
Может
thing
быть,
I liked.
единственное, что мне понравилось.
A detailed description of the life of the middle class from the hinterland of the United States, there in the late 80s, early 90s. So, I'm not going to read about Geiger. Gentlemen magicians. All of the above has a practical application in the context of working with the deities of chaos. Do I understand correctly that you are preaching work through evocation after all? This is what we have just told has no practical application. These are preliminary, you know, caresses, that is, a very preliminary approach, an explanation of the meanings, through which we will explain other meanings, through which we will already tell about the gods of chaos, and then practical work will have some meaning. And some kind of revocation, but we have never engaged in calling any shit. Initially, I said just that nothing would be said about it in this broadcast. And here are various terms like evocation, there is an invocation to us. We have a different terminology, let's say, here. Do you understand? When new settings appear in your head, in your tone, with which you can perceive it, why is it still superfluous to give some kind of definition? You will see it, and you will understand how best. You know, Zuzapuk, I want to say, and if you don't see it, then whatever word you call invocation, location, fuck, for you, for us, the fucking walkie-talkie, Russian is a native language for you, please use the Russian language. If you see a term, again, not a Russian word, which has its origin in Latin, from Greek, look for its translation. It turns out to be usually very simple and understandable. That is, all this shit with evocations, invocations, and other shit. What is an invocation? This is a call. In other words, use your native language, translate everything into your native language, and invent new words in your native language, if there are no such words in your language yet. This is the development of your native culture. Great, indeed. Many of these simple things do not understand each other. And who needs you in a foreign culture? Nobody needs them there. And long dead, I want to note. Gentlemen magicians, but how can people stop being bedbugs and cockroaches of any chaos? How to evolve, and stop there by visiting more blissful worlds. Once again, watch the messenger of chaos, watch the voice of the universe, practice. I'll answer that. Don't be half-witted. And when you find yourself in the perception, you can say in the face of the gods of chaos, sometimes they will look, they will say, it's not a misery, well done. We need to give him candy, teach him something, teach him. But there is a scudome, and it will appear. I mean, well, at best, it will crush you. And at worst, they will want to explore. And what the fuck is this? Some type of dementia. He's very interesting. And the one from whom they will begin to dissect will not be very happy about it. Gentlemen magicians, join the Gigawi movement. Stop being much better. Gentlemen magicians, are you familiar with the world of chaos from the books of the Iron Chronicle of Amber? There are interesting moments there. I read this work as a child, and I want to say that what we call the worlds of chaos has nothing at all to do with what we call the worlds of chaos, even in the refraction of human culture. Have I read these Barn Chronicles of Iron? Not all of them. Well, I read some of them, that is. Iron is a good author. I don't know anything about him. In other words, I want to say that here, look, the Iron Dutch is just a great example of what you were talking about at the very beginning. We will not make these broken clocks round, but we will make them square and back and forth. In other words, he just has a classic, the perception of chaos as a changed order. Well, just like that. Do you agree with me? Well, yes, it is. And you know, he's very much at the top in terms of chaos. That is, it doesn't even have square gears, but just a different color, for example. That is, it's from the category. That's when I always say that when people imagine aliens, they imagine people with dog heads. It's just that in your head, you are now scrolling through most of the fantastic films about aliens, and you will notice that there are just people with some of these. With stupid heads over there with these here. Let's just say humanoids with a different biological basis, that's all. Well, how about another biological one? The same arms and legs, it's just that he has silicone shit, as a rule. They're with some tentacles on the fucker. There are the same strangers to see. As a rule, some Negro dressed up in a silicone suit pretends to be like this. Gentlemen magicians, the basic code turns out to be the code that was before any sabotage of people. In other words, this is a very long time before the first city settlements, and even before the incomprehensible reduction of the brain in humans. Well, not that before, it's like the basic code is human. And all this wrecking, as we notice, it works exactly at a high level. That is, it is at a high level of talkativeness and meanings. And whether there was this basic code before the sabotage intervention, I do not know. I really lack knowledge here. And here, I want to say that I could speculate on this topic, but it will already be a very deep mythology, which you know. It's better that I don't reason so that I'm misunderstood. Just be quiet. And some time will pass. Maybe we can somehow explain it at a simpler level, and maybe so that there is no heresy of some kind. In other words, the importance is that we were not just listened to and understood, and most importantly understood correctly. Let it not be the first time with an addition there, let it be at least from the 10th. And the most important thing is that the idiots who listen to us, if they start to carry some kind of shit, what do you know? So we could always besiege them and say, what the fuck are you talking about? Shut up here. Gentlemen magicians, I know that Lovecraft did not write about chaos, it's just that once Lovecraft's works were pulled up to the stream, then for unknowability after all, in theory, what then is unknowability with respect to chaos? Lovecraft was just writing about chaos. That is this one, do you remember his description exactly this one, how he is a fucking god who plays flutes, who lies between atoms. And for that one? Yes, for the one that lies between the interatomic spaces of this vigorous chaos, where all the energy is hidden. It was Lovecraft who wrote about chaos the best of all. That is, it is his description of chaos, again through the prism of modern culture. And again, in fact, Lovecraft's culture can be considered relatively modern. It is the closest to the original. And the unknowability of chaos is a little bit just different concepts. You know how, I do not know, sour and green, and it would be nice if we had the strength to sort out such subtleties someday, but not now. I just don't see the point in delving into these subtleties right now. All right, if we ever have. I agree. I think it's time to finish. Come on, I'm going to read out the last two comments right now. Gentlemen magicians, it may be useful to recall Pavlov's signaling systems and the peculiarities of perception of these two systems, to describe Nola as well. Shuioli. Here is such a simple question. That's how your tone works in general, that you drew the description of the other to Pavlov's signaling systems. Adal, Kuklachev did his best. Here he is, Kuklachev so messed up the brains of a man that he said such nonsense. And I will explain. This man 5 times. It makes sense. I wrote my question 5 times. The moderators deleted it, so I'll read it out just for perseverance. How do your ways of mind work in general? That you have connected Pavlov's signaling systems, which are responsible for the physical work of the body with the signal. Me again. Wait, Wait,
Подожди,
I'm
я
here, I want to
хочу
explain.
объяснить.
I'm without a
Я
lift.
без
I don't want
подъёбок,
to
я
offend
не
you
хочу
somehow or
как-то
that's what
вас
it is, but.
оскорбить или вот это что, но
Sorry, but this is a
извините, но
very
это
different
вообще
topic
очень
in
разные
general.
темы.
These are
Это
very
очень
different
разные
topics,
темы,
and the
и
very fact that you are
сам
linking them
тот
together
факт, что вы
suggests
связываете
that you did
воедино,
not
говорит о
understand a
том,
fucking thing
что
from
вы
what we said
вообще
today.
нихуя не поняли из того, что мы сегодня говорили.
Gentlemen magicians,
Господа маги,
Lovecraft
Лавкрафт
very
очень
often
часто в
mentioned a
своих
certain
произведениях
Necronomicon in his
упоминал
works.
некий
Did he really
Некрономикон.
invent
Он
this book?
действительно придумал эту
I
книгу.
suspect not.
Подозреваю, что
I
нет.
suspect Howard Phillips
Подозреваю,
Lovecraft.
что Говард Филлипс Лавкрафт
There was something
что-то у
strange
него
about
было
his
странное
rebirths,
с
that despite
перерождениями,
all the
что
burden of his origin
несмотря
and
на
upbringing, he managed to connect to the Akashic
весь груз
Chronicles.
своего происхождения и воспитания, он сумел подключиться к хроникам Акаши.
He managed to
Он
connect to
сумел
the Akashic
подключиться к
records
хроникам
and read
Акаши
these books in
и
his
в
dreams.
сновидениях читал вот эти вот книги.
And he blinded
И
all of them
все
under
это он
one aegis,
слепил
called them
под
Anoncom.
одной эгидой, назвал Некрономиконом.
I don't know about the
Не знаю
Porridge
насчет
Chronicle,
хроника
but the
Акаши,
Necronomicon
но
definitely exists in
Некрономикон
real life.
однозначно существует в реале. Вот.
It may be called
Он
differently,
по-другому
but this is a slightly
называется,
different
но
topic.
это немножко другая
That is,
тема.
this is the
Это
topic.
вот тема,
Although no,
хотя нет,
it's actually the same
это
topic,
на самом деле
just
та
here
же
is a
самая
deeper
тема,
one.
просто вот более глубокая.
Because we can
От
say
того,
the
что
existence
сказать,
of a
что
Necronomicon, and indeed
Некрономикона
some cultists who in ancient times really worshipped those who can be called the gods of chaos.
поклонялись теми, кого можно назвать богами
It's
хаоса.
just that right
Просто
now
вот
we
сейчас у
don't
нас
have enough
сил
strength for
не
this,
хватит, и
and
я
I'm
не
not
уверен,
sure
что
that we should
следует
devote a separate
отдельную
topic to
тему
this
еще
yet,
посвящать
in order to cover
этому
such
вопросу.
subtleties. That is, the
То есть
Micronomicon here
Некрономикон
consider that it
что
exists.
существует.
It's just
Просто
unlikely that this
вряд
is
ли
what
это
you
то,
imagine
что
for
люди
yourself.
представляют.
Yes, and
Не
absolutely not
совершенно
what
не
is
то,
walking on the
что
internet.
гуляет в
There is
интернете.
complete heresy
Интернете
on the
гуляет
internet.
полная ересь,
Well, as a fan,
Как
fake,
масонская
fan
подделка.
fiction, merch,
Фанфики,
that's it.
мерч,
Well,
вот
no,
это вот
you
всё.
know,
Ну, не,
it would be
понимаешь,
nice
хорошо
if
были
fan
бы
fiction and
фанфики и
merch.
мерч.
No,
Это
this is Masonic
масонское
sabotage.
издательство.
The Necronomicon that can be found on the
Некрономикон, который
internet.
можно найти на просторах интернета.
And I think we'll
И
finish
я
it
думаю,
for now. Then we'll
пока
think about
закончим,
whether it's
потом
worth
подумаем,
continuing this
стоит ли
topic,
еще
maybe some.
продолжить эту тему какие-то.
I still think
Я
that
все-таки
they are
думаю, что
already getting
они
quite
уже
communist
совсем
magicians'
получается
themes.
темы
Maybe on
магические.
Messengers of
Может быть,
Chaos,
повестники
when
хаоса,
we,
когда мы,
that is, it will be.
будет не
That is, there may be a stream dedicated, you know, everyone, and then we stream on each god of chaos. And so, I really
Я
hope
очень надеюсь,
that we
что
will
нам
have
в
enough strength
ближайшее
in the near
время
future,
хватит силёнок,
because we
потому
have
что
everything ready
материально у нас всё
financially.
готово.
Everything is ready
Всё
for the new
готово
updated
для
ether of the Hangers of
нового
Chaos.
обновленного эфира на Вестнике Хаоса.
But, while
Но пока
Scheherazade
Шахерезад
finishes the permitted
заканчивает
speeches,
дозволенные
so
речи,
fuck beg.
такая хуйня
Bye
говорят.
bye.
Пока-пока.
Gaius, wait for
Гой,
us,
Гая, ждите
the
нас
Hangers
на
of
Вестнике
Chaos.
Хаоса.
We will
Найти
continue
тему,
to tell these
которую
topics.
рассказать.
Гая-гой.